Joey Osborne.
Hello, how are you?
I'm so good. Here we are.
Absolutely. Good to see you.
Good to see you. This is exciting. This is a very special More Cheese Less Whiskers. We interrupt this regular programming to talk about something very impactful. So I'm super excited about this. This is the
All
first
right.
time that normally when I do a More Cheese Less Whiskers, we're talking about how to apply the 8 profit activators to a business. And when you shared your news with me, I thought immediately that this would be a fun thing to talk about. So
I can't
kind
wait.
of
Yeah.
introduce yourself and announce. We'll have an announcement right here.
The grand announcement.
That's
Yeah,
right.
so Joey Osborne, I've been inflicted with this thing, entrepreneurism, my entire life and haven't been able to recover from it. So, yeah, that's how I met Dean Jackson, actually, because of that. And what I'm really wondering is how long have we known each other? 12 years? I don't know,
Yeah,
10.
that's probably right.
And this is the first time I've been invited to the podcast. So apparently, all my business stuff is just down the drain. And now that I'm officially a politician, you're interested in.
That's so funny. Yeah.
Yeah, but no, I've always also had this interest in politics, and it's taken several different forms over the years. But the latest iteration of it is, I'm running for the U.S. Congress here in the where I live in the mountains of North Carolina against a 20-year incumbent, and we're in the same political party, same philosophical kind of things. But yeah, I just kind of got to the point where I've said I don't want to keep doing this. I don't want to continue this, seeing this what I consider is a pretty bad state of the way government operates. So yeah, so that's why I'm here.
That's so exciting. I just recorded a podcast with Dan Sullivan this morning, and I was sharing that I was going to do this podcast with you. And I don't know if you knew this, but Ted Budd, who is a senator for
Yeah,
North Carolina, those former congressman, he's been
yeah.
in strategic coach for 16 years, I think.
No, I did not know that. I was in coach during that period, but I guess we overlap. No, I had no idea about that.
Okay, so he had a really interesting, this is one of the overlays that I want to look at is, he and Dan, developed a pretty unique approach to Ted's campaign initially for Congress, and now he's in the Senate. But the approach was using the DOS conversation, dangers, opportunities, and strengths. And what Ted did was he identified kind of 20, we'll call them influencers, the people who would have stake or have voice for people on both sides, the Republican and Democrat. So let's say 10 each, and have these conversations where he would start with the Dan Sullivan question that if we were having this conversation 3 years from now, what would have to have happened for you to be happy with the progress? And what do you see as the three, the biggest dangers facing our congressional district and our country? What do you see as the big opportunities that we have to capitalize on? And what are the greatest strengths that we have? And just having those conversations and note take, like, capturing what they said, and then looking collectively at what the consensus was among the 20. What would be you identify then the three biggest dangers, the three biggest opportunities, and the three biggest strengths, and that became the platform to work from. So every speech, everything that he talked about was, we're facing some dangers right now, and those are this and this, and that's collectively what the zeitgeist would be saying that they're concerned with right now. I was curious what you thought of
No,
those.
Oh, that's a really interesting approach to take to it. Obviously, it makes total sense because, like you and I talked about before, campaigning and trying to win an election is not that much unlike advertising and trying to sell something, right? We're looking to gain compliance one way or another. Yeah, and what better way to do it than to, again, using a marketing term, is to enter the conversation that's already going on in our case, the electorate's
Mhm.
mind. So, no, that's really neat, and it's absolutely worked because that seat that Bud won was a very competitive seat. So it's a, yeah, North Carolina
Interesting.
pretty much split. So yeah, very cool. No, it would not be a difficult thing to apply
What do
to
you see if you were just to think right now? Like, what would be your take on that? Of what do you see as like some of the dangers? I'm always curious what motivates, somebody like you to want to,
yeah.
go into this arena.
Yeah. So I, my take on it has been that most everybody's dealing with very granular issues as well as they should. Things like healthcare, and we've got the immigration issue, all these issues that are important. But for me, I've zoomed out now 30,000 feet to see
Mhm.
try to get a vision of what's really going on. So I think that what's got to be fixed before all these granular things can get fixed is to make some major changes in the kind of people we're sending to Washington and what their motivations are once they get there. I
Mhm.
think that it's up to like 95% of people polled now are
Mhm.
dislike Congress or have some issues with Congress. Yet when you poll them about their individual Congress people, they're okay with those. And there is something that's been determined that causes that, or there's a name for that. But the big thing for me is, yeah, I could go granular, and I've got plans and have done that as being a fixer entrepreneur. I always try to figure out, how do we fix something? But the big thing to fix right now is there's some really big areas. Campaign finance reform is huge. This upcoming Senate race, I haven't heard the latest numbers, but probably $50 million or $100 million spent on that election. It costs close to $1 million to win a House seat in this
Mhm.
environment. That needs to be fixed, because that takes out the little man. So now the only players are the people who can write the big checks, right? And they get the influence. But to answer your question, just a very big picture approach to, let's fix the system first by getting people in the system who are actually representing the people and not special interest. Then
Mhm.
I think all these little, not little, but these granular things that I'm talking about
Mhm.
can get fixed, because now politics is off the table and we're sitting down, Democrats, Republicans, whatever the parties are, but can, have a negotiation, a conversation, just like you would in business.
What do you see, or what do people see as the primary role or influence of your congressman
Mm-hmm.
on a federal level? Because it's a
Yeah.
very interesting dynamic. It's different than running for municipal office where you're 100% focused on solving the problems in the local market. You're being elected as the national representative from this area in national matters, right?
Yeah.
In federal matters or whatever.
Yeah, no, it's a very appropriate question. And I feel like it's one that most people don't understand. And it's one of these things that the framers were just amazingly, foresightful, brilliant
Mhm.
individuals that set this thing up. So the House of Representatives is what I'm running for, has always been from the very beginning designed to be the voice of the people in Washington. The framers envisioned that we would have, and there's 435 of them. So each state
Mhm.
has a number based on population. So that was the role of the House of Representative member, to be in the district, getting interaction with the people. When we first started, you had to be out there doing it face to face. Now that's changed a lot, though the way Congress does it unfortunately hasn't evolved much over the last 50 years. But
Mhm.
so then the role of the Senate, and this is a really cool thing. It's the role of the Senate in their minds was to be a much more deliberative body. I don't like to use the term smarter, but senators tend to have more experience and more ability to reason and to
We
negotiate.
kind of actually make the laws, right? That's
Yeah, well, both bodies do that, but yeah, the Senate was designed to be the deliberative part of that. The House of Representatives goes out, supposedly gets the voice of the people, brings it back to Washington, puts up legislation, and then the Senate was to deliberate that. And it's pretty much the way it works. So, then that's why they had senators have 6-year terms, members of the House of Representatives only have 2. So the framers had that nailed. But unfortunately, that has evolved over 250 years to something that doesn't resemble too much what the framers had in mind. And that's what I want to fix. Term limits is top of the list. When we poll people, healthcare right now is a big issue for folks because they can't afford medicine. But term limits is a big deal. Congress didn't, or the framers of the Constitution didn't include term limits because they had really no clue how this thing would evolve. No one could have. I believe now that it's time for term limits. So that solves a big part of the problem. But anyway.
You mean like that you can only, like a lot of Congress are like lifetime, long-term, just continual renewal. And you're saying to have 1 term or 2 terms
Yeah.
that they can.
Yeah, the consensus is for the House of Representatives members to serve only 3 terms, which would be 6 years. I feel like that's good. I've committed to only serve 2 if I'm about to get elected, and only 1 if we can find somebody better than me, because I have no desire. It's an expensive move for me, as you know. I derive a lot of my income from selling and trading stocks. It's another problem that we have most of our members of Congress now who are actually trading stocks in companies that they regulate. So I've promised to be out of the stock market for a couple of years anyway. But term limits would be huge. Again, most members of Congress will say they're for term limits. The person I'm opposing has been in 20 years. She has not come out that she's against term limits, but it's pretty obvious that she.
It's very interesting. There's actually a fund or something where you can trade with the congressman. Like you can follow Nancy Pelosi or whatever. You can do whatever she does. Or I mean, it's pretty amazing the rags to riches stories of a lot of these, politicians who made whatever they make, $180,000 a year or something. And yeah.
Yeah, no, their net worth accumulates. But I think there's an ETF for Pelosi. But in all fairness, and I've looked at some of those ETFs, they typically don't outperform the market. So, even though they're able to gain this, in some cases, inside information and that, I'm not saying any of them are.
And it's a better story. It's very I mean, it's such a great outlier.
For sure.
But I love this. I like that idea of what Dan mentioned about finding the influencers. And what struck me, I don't know whether I've shared this with you, but there's a podcast called How I Built This by Guy Raz, and he interviews founders of companies and they tell the story of starting up. And there was one podcast that he did with Miles Copeland, who was the brother of Stuart Copeland and the manager of the Police, the band. And he was telling the stories of, he basically learned management because he was managing his brother's band. That was how he got into the music business, right? And his reflection on it was that the number one job of a manager is to make sure that people know your band exists. That was, he surmised, that's the number one thing. Yeah. But then he thought that some people matter more than others. Who really needs to know that your band exists is the 440 event bookers in the UK who book bands into the venues where there's live music. So to that end, he started a magazine that looked like a full-on, big circulation magazine, and he only distributed it to the 450 event bookers in the UK. And I thought it's so insightful, so interesting that when Dan was talking about those influencers, that's what came to my mind is who would be the types of people like in your 5th congressional district there I think I asked Charlotte how many, there's like 750,000 people in your district there. Who would be the influencers that would come to mind in that arena?
Yeah, it's typically been done where you go out and find the political leaders. Maybe it's like the sheriffs of the counties. They tend to stay in office a while and they carry some esteem with the voters. That's been usual model, approaching other political leaders, maybe folks who have served before and are now out of office to gain their endorsement, right? So that's the way that model's been done. I'm my approach to it is to utilize go the opposite of that as much as I can, is utilizing social media now to try to get just to the people on an individual basis. Again, that's why we have We the People in all of our historical documents. And yeah, to encourage people to think for themselves. And now there's a really unique opportunity with the way social media operates now, is that you can share things and not have to like just let people decide for themselves kind of thing. But finding those influencers and those top people in politics, I think most of the successful influencers are smart enough to stay out of politics. So there's not the volume of them as there are in other things. Joe Rogan, as an example, stepped in the
Yeah.
last presidential election and had a huge impact on it. So that part can happen. What I really keep waiting for and hoping for is someone who's already has a lot of fame and notoriety and respect will step up and run for some major office and can win an election just based on who they
Who
are.
they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's interesting. Is there anybody that comes to mind, like, who would be the top of mind in your district? Like, who are
Oh yeah.
the notables in the fifth congressional district, whether they're
Yeah.
former politicians or not? Who are those?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't think there's anyone here that has that sort of notoriety or fame, nor in any congressional district. I'm thinking more on the federal, like the presidential level and maybe Senate level. If you think about somebody like I mentioned, Rogan, he could run for an office and have a really good opportunity to win. And on the other side, people like Oprah, just big names and credibility can do it. But here in local politics, which is, even though, yeah, there are 800,000 people in this district and about 400,000 voters, it's very local. It's like people have their concerns based on the geographic area. Then that was the whole plan for it. But honestly, I don't know that there's anyone here that has that sort of fame already, and that's really the problem with the system. So what replaces that notoriety and trust and confidence is a ton of money that gets poured in by mostly the big PACs and super PACs who want to get an individual elected for something. So they'll make that person relatively famous just by spending tons of
I'm
money.
curious about how many people do you have to influence to win that election? You mentioned, 400,000 voters. What kind of voter turnout would come to a congressional, the midterm
Yeah,
election
it's not.
kind of thing?
Yeah, super question, because this is a primary that I'm running
Yeah.
in, and primaries typically have lower turnout,
Yeah.
maybe 20 to 30% of the turnout that a regular general election has. Then coupled with that, this is an off-year presidential election, so there's not a big presidential debate going on here in North Carolina. We do have a Senate seat so that will drive some traffic, but there are, in my particular race, there are now four of us. There are three challengers and the incumbent, which will lower that threshold needed that I would need to get elected. But to answer your question, probably 60 or 70,000 votes would at least get me into a runoff with the incumbent. So no, it's not a lot. It's not a lot, relatively speaking.
That's an interesting thing. I wonder have you looked into the data available? It's funny, the thought, two thoughts. And this is fun to like brainstorm and connect all of these things. So I think about Cambridge Analytica, the company that was behind Donald Trump getting elected in 2016. And what was the most fascinating thing about watching that documentary was how granularly they looked at the key areas and they got it into each of the voting precincts and divided everybody into, they had the people who were like, blue, and the people who were red, and then they identified and focused all their attention on what they called the persuadables, was the
Yep.
middle. And they, so you may take a voting precinct and it may be 30,000 people that represents in there, and they would target specific, local, very psychologically oriented messaging
Yeah.
completely relevant to that person to move the needle on them. And I'm curious what kind of data is available either through, public record, or is our voter rolls available, like of people who
Yeah.
actually voted. And
Yeah, they are. And it kind of progresses up the line depending on how much money you want to spend. But the general data, like the not registered voters, that data is available usually at no cost. There's some effort because you have to
yeah,
get it from each county, but there are
yeah,
aggregators. So yeah, you can buy a list reasonably affordable right now that breaks the list down in terms of the party. Are they here in North Carolina? We basically have three: Republican, Democrat, and
yeah,
unaffiliated. And another really interesting twist on things is this unaffiliated number in North Carolina and most states now has either matched or outnumbered the Republicans or Democrats. So more people are
that's
registered.
true for the whole country, really.
It is.
I think
Yeah.
if we looked at it, most people would be in that middle, the larger middle. Yeah,
I totally agree. Though the loudest voices are on the extreme.
of
So yeah,
course.
but you're right.
Yeah,
It's easy to lose sight of the fact that most people are moderate and neutral.
yeah.
But then to go deep with your question, it's really, again, spending enough money, you can get super, super granular because there are companies like Cambridge and others who do that. But then we can also do lookalike audiences, and I'm
Hmm.
going to be doing some of that. I only have, as you know, less than 60 days now before the primary. I got in very late, but so I'm only, time wise, I don't have the time necessary to really even having that data to start to influence and to
Yeah.
contact those people. But here's
Mhm.
something, a little simple thing, and this is what I'm trying to do. Is my objective, as much as getting elected, is to at least make a good enough showing that I can establish that there is another way to do this. And you always hear grassroots talked about in politics. So
Mhm.
I ran for Congress 6 years ago, and the one precinct, the place that I did the best, I finished second in that particular place, was the one that I stood all day and handed everybody that came in the door a card. And what is known is, and it varies from race to race, but usually fewer than 60% of people who come in actually know who they're voting for. Obviously,
Mhm.
presidential race, but when you start looking down the ballot, you don't know who these people are. There might be a
Mhm.
name that rings a bell. But what I found was just by standing there, introducing myself and handing them my card, that I finished
The
second.
name, Yeah, that's right. Oh,
So,
yeah, these
so
seems
that's a
like,
strategy that can be done with volunteers, and I'll be doing that in as many of the polling places as I can get to. And there's 10 counties, so there's probably 200 or 300 polling places. So having a volunteer at each one of those, or someone working each one of those, I think will be a big needle mover. We'll see, because that typically doesn't happen in primaries.
how many precincts are there in your district?
Yeah, so they're roughly, I'm going to say 200. I'm in the process of getting a count now. There are
Yeah.
10 counties, and it varies. The smaller, less populated counties may only have five, but some of the bigger, more populated have 15 or 20. So I think probably around 150 or 200 polling places.
One of the things that was fascinating, I think I mentioned to you, we did an Olive Marketing podcast a couple of times with Richard Viguerie,
Mhm.
who he's the gentleman that basically created the conservative fundraising movement, and I remember him talking about I think maybe it was 1962 or 64 when the presidential election had happened, and it was the first time that they passed the rule that anybody that donated $100 to a political candidate had to be registered. That donation had to be noted, right? And so through freedom of information, he had access to all of that, and he went in, and they wouldn't give you the list, but you could write it down. And he brought in like, six people with him, and over the next period of time, they wrote on index cards 12,500 names of the political donors that supported the conservative candidate. And that
Wow.
so he had that list, which was at the time the only list of these conservative donors. And he recalled the first time, the day he had the list, like data entered and put on a magnetic tape, is how they stored data back then, that he
Yeah.
rented the list for $350, which was big bucks in the time. So he was like shut down the office, took everybody out for lunch, and realized that we're on to something. And he started building these lists in every, state elections, and going all the way down, building anybody who had donated money, and built that list up to hundreds of thousands of people, and probably now millions.
Oh, yeah.
Knowing that those are the people who are the fundraisers, the contributors, that was such a, he's kind of largely credited with getting Ronald Reagan elected in the 80s
Yeah,
for,
I remember you talking about him before. Yeah, yeah, that was a big shift in
yeah,
politics, and
yeah,
he unleashed a giant, was to be a giant business model for sure.
yeah. I think that's funny though. I think he's like, I love him so much. He's so enthusiastic. He loves marketing. He loves politics. He loves conservative, politics. That's his thing, right? His mission is, spreading conservatism. And I just thought, man, that's such an interesting, if that's available for you, like in this limited time, if you look at if the goal is to really, you really have to influence 10% of the people 100% of the way. And that's kind of an interesting approach. I learned that from Roy Williams talking about radio advertising, that
Mm,
talking about reach or frequency, that you have the choice is, do you want to convince 100% of the people 10% of the way, or do you want to convince 10% of the people 100% of the
100%
way?
of the way. Yeah.
And that's, so if you knew who those 60,000 persuadables are for you, and you could focus all of your attention on those people.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
No, yeah, no, that's an interesting approach. And
a,
it's not the shotgun approach. It's very precise and obviously
Mhm,
very efficient.
mhm.
And yeah, I think that's a good thing. And maybe those people are the unaffiliated folks who, again, this is maybe specific to North Carolina, but if you're unaffiliated, you can vote in either of the Republican or Democratic
Oh yeah,
primaries.
yeah.
So, I mean, you could run a sort of a gambit and go after unaffiliated voters who don't necessarily like you, but they know you're going, because again, we have the gerrymandering thing that comes into play. So this district that I'm in is fairly heavily gerrymandered toward Republicans, right? It's like +7 or something like that. So basically, whoever wins the Republican primary wins the general election. Kind
Mhm.
of pretty much no amount of money that the Democrats could spend to beat whoever wins the Republican
So
primary.
that's
So
an interesting thing, right? Like you look at that, there's probably a certain percentage that, if you did you say the makeup of the field is, you've got the incumbent who's Republican, you've got you, did you say there's a Democrat and and
well,
unaffiliated, or is it only
no,
the Republican
yeah.
primary?
So in the primary, yeah, there are
I got it.
three of us challenging the incumbent. We're all for
All Republican. Yeah,
all
yeah. Okay.
Republicans. Yeah. So there are some Democrats, I think, who have already announced, but they'll have their primary also.
I got it. I got it.
So yeah, so the idea is that maybe some of these unaffiliated who realize that the Democrat who maybe they prefer is
Hmm.
not going to win, they'll go try to get rid of the incumbent and vote for one of us three just to get her out of the picture because she's won by substantial margins in every election. So this will be her 10th, I guess, or 12th.
I think that's funny because that's the question I asked you. Is she beloved? Is she like
Yeah.
an
Well,
institution, right?
again, unfortunately, people vote on name recognition. So they've seen her name, for 20 years now. So they assume that it's all good. Yeah. Yeah. But I
It's
think
very,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, it's very like I'm curious about the messaging, like what advantage they're going to be, if we say profit activator number one, that's the conversation we're kind of having is selecting the single target market and kind of saying, okay, the unaffiliated, that's going to be a particular, that'll be
Message.
important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then, in terms of the Republicans, that there's but maybe, if she's the incumbent, there's probably like staunch supporters of her that let's not rock the vote.
Yeah.
She's doing fine. But then there are probably others that you could, get on board. There's probably some that are not that thrilled with what she's done.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm trying to do, and the approach I'm
Mhm.
taking is sharing because there's a wealth of data out there on her voting record, on her, like you mentioned, who've contributed to her campaign, how much money, her spent expenditures, all of that now is so easy to get to. There's a
Mhm.
really good website called opensecrets.org, and you can
Okay.
search any candidate there and see, I mean, everything's there, the stocks that they own, committees that they sit on, their votes, their funding. So I use that a lot, and I just pull up snippets and I'm sharing them on social media. And as I think I mentioned to you, we're going to start a paid campaign this week actually.
Yeah.
But so far, I've just been doing it on my own personal
Yeah.
Facebook page. But as an example, I mean, people are shocked to learn that my opponent she has $3 million in her campaign war chest, and she will spend it all to stay in power. But one of the expenditures I just ran across in opensecrets.org in the last election cycle, she spent $79,000 at a steakhouse in DC called Charlie Palmer's. There's multiple Charlie Palmer's. It's a very upscale restaurant, but it just kind of goes against the conservative grain to think that you would spend $79,000 30 separate trips there, 30 separate receipts totaling 79,000. So about $2,600 per time she goes to dinner there. So she's obviously taking people there. And I'm just wondering if any furniture factory worker from the mountains of North Carolina were invited to attend those dinners. But it's unbelievable. People don't realize that she happens to sit on she was chairman of or chairwoman of the House Education Committee for years. She's
Mhm.
now on another committee that actually manages and approves the bills that get to the floor of Congress. Those chairmanships to get those require a major contribution of money that gets transferred from, in her case, from her campaign account to the national Republican finance account, and that's
Mhm.
about a $400,000 or $500,000 a year fee you pay to
Mhm.
retain those seats. And the general public doesn't know about that. So I'm just sharing snippets and tidbits of that in hopes that enough people will say, yeah, this is enough. We need to change the system.
Mhm. Yeah, very interesting. I look at these like how are you approaching strategically your social media campaign? Because if we say like you can reach those people, the good thing even about Meta, like Facebook and Instagram, how you're able to, divide by visible things, is male and female
Yeah.
and age and what they interests, what their things are. Are you looking at like kind of fragmenting specific messages for specific groups or
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And again, time is going to be the limiter for
yeah.
you, but we'll start by targeting with the paid ads. We'll start by targeting the demographics that we know are the
Mhm.
most likely to come vote, right? And that's
Mhm.
typically age group over 50, much young. I mean, we'll go younger than that, but that's probably 40 up is the main sweet spot. with that. So we'll go after that. And obviously we can target geographically just the areas that we want to be in. So the plan so far is to start with those sort of things. Probably won't include an income criteria, but keeping them as general as possible, and then let Facebook do its thing, right? And see what happens, or not Facebook, but any of the platforms, let their algorithms run and see how that part goes. And obviously we'll split test. We'll, have 4 or 5 different message types going out at the same time to see what seems to resonate. I don't know how well lookalike audiences will work in this realm, but we'll see about doing that as well.
I think if I were thinking about like what I know about how to target those things is I think initially one of the things that you could do is pick, the main segments of messaging that you want to get apart and creating a video ad about that particular or video message about that. And Facebook will let you track how many people watch, like, 10% of it or 25% or 50% or the people who watch all the way through. And you can build an audience from that, like for each of those video impressions is about, 1 or 2 cents for if you're just doing video views, you're not forcing an action or you're not looking for opt-ins or
Right.
anything. But if you get people who are at least, if you see video ad with you, but there's a banner in the ad that is like headlining the messaging, that would be a very interesting thing to see who's like responding to that hot button and then targeting more specific ads to them.
Yeah. No, I like that. We'll definitely take that approach for sure, because those topics are known right now. Healthcare, not just the polling that I've done through my own Facebook page, but in general, there are 3 or 4 top issues. It was the border, 3 or 4, whatever it's been years ago, but that's fixed really now. So, but yeah, I think those topics are the thing. And I love that idea of just, so you think just going for views as opposed to anything else, especially with only 60 days
Well, I think initially, like you going for the views only in the first run, and then anybody that watches 50% or more of your message to have those people and retarget, starting immediately adds to those people. So you're just kind of gathering your audience, the ones that are persuadable, right? The ones that have that idea. I was talking with a client who is a insurance agent, and we were talking about, homeowners insurance, and most people only ever think about their homeowners insurance when it's coming up for renewal. Like, so once a year, it's there unless something happens and there's a significant change or there's a claim and they're unhappy with their current program. Most people aren't jumping ship in the middle of a thing. And I would, so I was sharing with him, it's very similar in real estate. Like you've got a short window of time. Is it 60 days, you said, coming up now? Yeah. So you look at it, it's like, so we did this real estate campaign where with Julie Matthews here in Winter Haven, we picked an area, a popular area that she wanted to get listings, but she had no market share in the area. And we looked at the graph of when the majority of people list their homes. And so, we lagged back 8 weeks from the peak of when most of the listings actually came on the market. And instead of sending like once a month for a year, we sent once a week for 8 weeks, leading into the busiest time when most of the 60% of the listings happened. And we just did these simple postcards that were just focused on particular messages, right? Like, so we had the here's how to find out what homes in any neighborhood are really selling for. Here's why some homes take so long to sell and what to do about it. Here's what it really costs to buy a bigger home. All the thoughts that somebody might be having. And I think if you looked at those kind of headlines or sound bites of the big issues that might be the kind of 8 hot button things that would
Yeah,
be relevant to have a soundbite take on those.
that's a really good idea. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there, is it, does it make sense in politics, or do people shy away from having something in writing about their positions? Or like, would it make sense if if you had a book or a series of written things that would be a plan for I'm reminded of like Ross Perot when he was running right in the 90s,
Yeah.
and how like being on television, he bought an hour of television to do an infomercial basically. Or
Yeah. He always had his little whiteboard or
yeah,
clipper or something. And
exactly. And his
just,
flip charts or whatever, and his little pointer.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's not a, I mean, that's a really good idea. I mean, that kind of thing works for sure. So, yeah, I like that.
Because I'm curious, if you had that kind of like, if you had a series of the things like that top 10 things that somebody could jump on, that you're feeling like you're, educating those people. Like if you look at it, reach those 400,000, it is probably the audience of that would probably only be a couple 100,000 or a few hundred
Yeah.
thousand that would be that you could identify. And so if
Yeah.
you look at a CPM of, let's call it $20 or $30 on those things. So because the reach and the frequency of being able to get to them, it would cost, let's call it $30 per thousand to reach all of those people. So if you say 200 times 30 is whatever that is, 600 or 6,000.
6,000.
Yeah. So if that was a thing, it can kind of reach everybody, once a week for 8 weeks for a $50,000 investment kind of
Yeah.
thing. It's a very, yeah, it's very interesting to just kind of take the math. I remember last time when you were ready, you had calculated like what it costs to get a
Yeah.
vote estimated
Yeah.
wise,
Yeah.
right? Like,
The cost to acquire and
yeah,
to
yeah.
vote. Yeah. And I was just thinking about that earlier. I don't remember that number, but it may be, I don't know, close to $100.
Hmm.
It's a big number doing
Hmm.
the way it's been done before. And that's the problem with the system. It takes so much money now to basically
Yeah.
buy an election and that's what I want to try to change. And I'm doing everything I can to keep the
Hmm.
budget as low as possible, not
Hmm.
just for me, but just for whoever the next person who comes along that wants to, because as an example, I'm not accepting any campaign contributions. So I'm going to fund this myself. And my limit is probably $100,000. I would rather spend 50, but if I see, and we'll do a poll somewhere, within the last couple of weeks to see if I'm gaining traction. And then, yeah,
Hmm.
maybe it's worth putting some money in. But this is such a fascinating thing. It's fun to be in this arena because things happen. So it's not just that I'll be polling, but the incumbent will be polling, but also all these special interest groups who either like her or don't like her are polling. There's one called a really neat organization I like called Club for Growth. And they're usually, if Club for Growth wants you to win an election, you win the election. They're one of these
Mm.
super PACs that come in and run ads. I had the good fortune of interviewing with them when I ran before and
Mm.
up at DC. And so when I got ready to leave, I mean, it was a really intense questioning answer session. These guys are serious. But so when I got ready to leave, I said, well, when will I know if you're going to choose to endorse me? And they said, whenever you see ads start running, either against your opponent or for you, that you didn't authorize. So
Mhm.
that's what they do. But so my point is, if there's no way to know where they stand. I have to assume they like the incumbent because she
Yeah.
typically legislates in their favor. But if they see her getting weak, it's sort of like an animalistic kind of thing. If they see
Mhm.
she's getting weak and they realize it
Well,
with
you mentioned, I mean, she's 82, you
she's
said, or
82. Yeah. No,
82? Yeah. So,
82.
uh,
So, yeah. So they're watching trends and they know that all they have to do is win the primary, as I said, to win the
uh-huh.
general election to get their candidate. And it's a
Yeah.
lot cheaper for them to do that. So it could be, and that would be like the desired outcome for me or whoever is trying to do this on a shoestring, is to get enough popularity going so these outside players will come in and spend their money
Yeah.
without, because then they're not directly buying influence. If they write me a check for $10,000, they're not doing that because they like me. They're trying to buy
Mhm.
influence, and that's where the system is broken. So I'm just not going to take that. But
Mhm.
you can't stop them from doing what they want to do. The Supreme Court,
Mhm.
the super PACs can do what they want to do
Mhm.
without regulation. So that part's pretty fun to see what happens with
It's
that.
an interesting thing of, are all of your ads, are you encouraged or discouraged or forbidden from having a super PAC or having a non Joey Osborne fronted thing as a gathering of information? Could you have a polling thing like, because on Facebook, one of the things you can do is poll.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting thing. Is it possible for you to do like an arm's length or a invisible
Yeah,
poll?
and I hope I have this right. I think I do. There's a designation of what's called political action committees, and
Mhm.
those can be controlled and owned by the candidate and that sort of thing. So they have some flexibility. They still have to disclose. We still have to disclose who's paying for the ads. So that's the PAC part of PAC. That's political action committee. So they're regulated and controlled. The super PAC is a different animal in that prior to the last couple of years, the campaign, the candidate couldn't have any connection at all, any relationship at all with the super PAC. No
Mhm.
discussion, no negotiation, no
Mhm.
collaboration. That watered down a little, as you might expect it would, with the elected officials making the laws. But still, so those are the two main things. So one of the things I've done that I look forward to sharing with you, and I'll share in a few days, is I had an app. I built an app, and it's called Voter Up, and it's
Mhm.
specifically designed. I'm going to use it, and I'll make it available to others. It's sort of like a Reddit for
Yeah.
polling. I may have showed it to you before. It was in the works the last time I
Mhm.
ran, but now it's done.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, we had Claude, the AI, rewrite the
Mhm.
thing. It's amazing. Within 2 hours, we did what 5 years ago I spent $100,000 in 6 months doing. But
Right,
it's
right,
a cool app. So then I'll be able to post a question to the group, and they can vote for or against it, whichever way they stand, and
right.
can leave a comment. So, but that is a tool that I will look forward to using.
I'm fascinated. I mean, this is kind of such a cool thing
Well, it's so
that you're
related to
doing.
what it's totally related to what you do. As you
Yeah,
mentioned, you brought up the fact that all we're looking
yeah,
to do is get people to comply
yeah,
with something, and it's no different if you're trying to
yeah.
sell them a house or get them to
That's
vote
what I
for you.
say. You're trying to establish a brand, with
Yeah.
my definition of a brand, a buying reflex affecting now decisions. That's really what you're doing, is you're trying to impart a brand, a voting reflex
Yeah.
at the polls, and it shows that what you were able to do last time by physically meeting the people is a very interesting thing. The great
Well,
news is that, Ross Perot had to spend so much money to get the audience of people. And, you going live on the ability for you to go live on Facebook is the same,
yeah,
essentially the same thing, that you've
yeah,
got direct access to exactly who you need to have access to. It's really just
yeah.
about what's the message that's
It totally is. It totally is. And as you know, we all know with the viralness of things,
Mhm.
if you happen to hit the right chord and the right message, however, and it goes viral, yeah, you've probably 10x the volume that Ross Perot was paying for nothing for what Ross Perot was paying millions, to try
Mm.
to get to. It's how Trump won in 2016, right? So he just was
Yeah.
such a character. All the news people had to report. So sure, he spent a lot of money, but he didn't really have to because he was constantly on, on getting free
Mhm.
publicity. But no, that's what would make this work. That's where a Rogan or somebody like that could come in, and it's got a huge following already and do very well with this. But none of those people want none of those people want the job.
Right. Yeah, no, you're exactly right. It's
Yeah.
so yeah, it's so interesting. Just if you were to think like the primary message, what do you think if you had to like decide right now what the hot button message is or what the thing? Because I've been watching kind of your initial things and you're kind of taking it as just coming up from grassroots. I don't know about you guys, but I'm sick of this. And this is, it's like you're going to stand up for it.
Yeah, no, that's exactly the approach. I mean, it is who I am, so I don't have
Yeah.
to pretend that. So it comes
Uh-huh.
across naturally. I don't need the job. I don't even want the job. I just want to
Right.
change the
Yeah.
system.
Uh-huh.
I will say that I would enjoy learning more, getting in, behind the scenes and
Yeah.
learning more about what goes on, mainly so I can share it. And that's another thing
Mhm.
I will do if elected, is to share every single thing that goes on. If a lobbyist wants to come in and sit down, we'll do live stream and we'll have our conversation in front of as many people that want to see it. But no, that's the approach I'm taking, is going after the people who already know that they're fed up with the system, and then also educate those who are just not aware, sharing some of the things that are going on. So yeah, that's the approach.
I love it. So where can people follow along on your campaign? It'd be very interesting to gather some observers here. Like I'm kind of excited to have an inside view. And I mentioned this may end up being a series here that we kind of, as we learn what's going on, we can kind of
Uh,
share
no, I love that. So
what's
now that's
happening.
going to put pressure on me to try to win. So now I'll probably spend a half a million
Ah,
dollars just to prove it and not tell anybody what's going on. So it looks
oh,
like you and I have got it, like we're really a lot smarter than we are. But
yeah, yeah.
but no, there is a website now will definitely be up by the time this hits the air. It's www, obviously, dot joey dot vote. So joey dot vote.
Okay.
And
Oh, look at you, Joey dot vote. Okay.
yeah, yeah. So, and back to your question you asked earlier about a book and about white papers and platform. Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
be posting on each of the topics that we come up with to determine are relevant. Healthcare as an example. Not only am I looking to change the system and getting career politicians out, I do have ideas around all of the major topics of things that we can do and fix. So all that will be added to the website as we move along.
I love it. And that's how I would look at it is attract the people, like get those core message in front of everybody, see who pays attention to that, get them retarget,
Yeah.
show them more at the people who are watching to show them more to introduce them to the opportunity to go deeper on your things.
Yeah, no, I love that because it's trackable, it's knowable, it's
Mm.
math, as we talk about. If we can get it down to math, then it becomes a lot easier. So yeah, and I look forward to doing that part. We'll definitely keep track of that and move along on that path.
This is great. So Joey dot vote. Everybody
Joey
can
dot
go
vote.
and follow along. I appreciate you. I'm excited to watch it, and I think this is going to be a fun experiment.
Yeah, well, thank you for the opportunity to do this. This is great. And yeah, you and I can stay connected and see how it goes.
Awesome.